Mahaganapatim Shri Mahaganapatim Shri Mahaganapatim Manasa Smarami Mahaganapatim Manasa Smarami Mahaganapatim Manasa Smarami Vashishta Vamadevadi Vandita Mahaganapatim Manasa Smarami Vashishta Vamadevadi Vandita Mahaganapatim Manasa Smarami Vashishta Vamadevadi Vandita Mahaganapatim Mahadevasutam Mahadevasutam Guru Guhanutam Mahadevasutam Guru Guhanutam Mahadevasutam Guru Guhanutam Marakodi Prakasham Shantam Mahadevasutam Guru Guhanutam Marakodi Prakasham Shantam Mahakavya Natakadi Priyam Mahakavya Natakadi Priyam Mushika Vahana Modaka Priyam Mahakavya Natakadi Priyam Mushika Vahana Modaka Priyam Mahaganapatim Manasa Smarami Vashishta Vamadevadi Vandita Mahaganapatim
Namaskar and welcome to everybody. Swagatam to Namaste 2020. This is the global Utsava of soft power brought to you by the Center for Soft Power with support from the Indian Council for Cultural Relationships and S. Vyasa deemed to be university. This was a wonderful beginning to today since it is Vinayak Chaturthi or Ganesha Chaturthi. We had these young ladies, Purva and Pavni, who come from Chennai. Both are youngsters and they are also violinists. And it was really nice of them to accept to do this little video for us. I would like to say that when we thought about timeless topic for today, we thought that we had to bring people who make movies from different backgrounds. So we thought, then we said, no, we have to bring people connected to the industry in different ways. So that is how we chose the people who are going to speak today. And we thought that in tune with the ethos of our country and the philosophy of our country that has been around for tens of thousands of years, we should bring somebody who will show and speak about a very important aspect of life, which is our wildlife, our flora and fauna. Somewhere we have forgotten that flora and fauna can exist without man, but man cannot exist without flora and fauna. And what a wonderful way to start this, because today we have Ganesh Chaturthi. After all, Ganesha is looked on as the elephant god. So with these few words, I would like to invite and welcome Shri Ajay Bisaria, the High Commissioner of India to Canada. He has been such a great support to us in accepting to come, and he came for our Ayurveda seminar also. And it was really nice because we feel very enthusiastic about doing work like this when people in his position, encourage us. Shri Ajay Bisaria is a career diplomat and assumed appointment as High Commissioner to Canada in 2020. He is an IFS officer of the 1987 batch. Shri Ajay Bisaria was appointed Private Secretary to the Prime Minister of India in 1999 and served in this capacity till 2004. Sir, over to you now.
Namaskar. Thank you very much, Vijay Lakshmi ji, for that introduction. And greetings on Ganesh Chaturthi to everyone. Such an auspicious day to begin this conversation on. I want to, of course, say good evening to folks in India and good morning to those who are joining us in North America. And thank you again to the Center for Soft Power for putting together this wonderful panel as part of Namaste 2020. I'm delighted to join this panel on timeless cinema, and I really don't have a place here because this is a panel of experts. But as someone who loves cinema, loves watching it, loves showing it, it's a great privilege and honor to be part of it. I also want to greet the chair and the panelists, Aseem Chhabra ji, Manoj Bajpayee ji, Erin, Fraser, and Matt Bowes of Bollywood podcasts, and Amoghavarsha ji. You mentioned how important it is to talk about nature and wildlife. I've particularly, I didn't know any of the others, but I've admired Manoj Bajpayee's performances, his very powerful performances in some of the movies we've seen, and it's wonderful to have him on board as well. And really, I can't imagine a serious conversation about soft power without discussing the power of Indian cinema. And I thought I should leave the finer aspects of filmmaking and their promotion to our experts. But what I could focus on are two dimensions, which is cinema diplomacy, as we have deployed it and how it's changing over the years, and Indian cinema in Canada, which is again a very unique place that Indian cinema enjoys here. So we know that the Indian film industry is the most prolific in the world. We make 5 films a day, 1,800 a year. Compare that to Hollywood, which makes 700. In Canada, the number I believe is close to 100. So films in many ways are our best global ambassadors for India. Over my 3 decades as an Indian diplomat, I've seen the power of this medium in our diplomacy, in our engagement with the world. My first posting in Moscow, I saw the power of Raj Kapoor, who was better known and loved than any Indian political face that you could have produced. In fact, even today, if you sang Avara Hoon, particularly over vodka shots, with some Russians, they would love you for that, and they would hum along with you. So that was the power in the old days of Raj Kapoor cinema, in the days of the USSR and so on. In Berlin, I saw the power of Indian cinema being represented at the Berlinale in film festivals, which showcased everyone from Satyajit Ray to Shah Rukh Khan, and essentially showcased the power of Indian cinema. In Poland, which you just mentioned, Vijay Lakshmi ji, I had the honor to showcase a lot of Indian cinema, and particularly on one Republic Day, I remember Rani Mukherjee came in promoting her film Mardani, which was photographed, or the director of photography was a Polish photographer called Artur Zurawski. And she spoke about trafficking, human trafficking, trafficking in girls, which was such a hot issue in Europe at that time. So this became a center point of a conversation of an Indian representative of cinema talking about a global issue in Europe. My last posting, as you may know, was in Pakistan. I spent a couple of years there. And in Pakistan, we have an absolutely unique relationship with Indian cinema. The people love it. They consider Indian cinema part of their own cinema for historic reasons and various other reasons, but the establishment wants to censor Indian movies. I've had people coming to me in Pakistan and asking for visas, quoting Bajrangi Bhaijaan, saying that in that Salman Khan movie, if you don't give us a visa, we would want to go to the border and try to cross it. Please give us a visa to go to India. But the establishment tries to censor Indian movies, it tries to ban them, and this plays into the politics of the day. In Pakistan, in fact, when I had diplomatic receptions at my place, inviting people from across the world and Pakistani friends, and I tried to get some artists from India, particularly from cinema. It didn't work. The visas weren't available. So we called in folks from Lahore, and they sang Mohammad Rafi and Kishore Kumar and Jagjit Singh better than anyone else one could have imagined. So that was the power of cinema in South Asia, which is percolating to every different level. In fact, Shafqat Amanat Ali, who's sung for Indian movies as well, sang for us Vaishnav Jante for Gandhiji's favorite bhajan for his birthday. It became a viral sensation. And in that sense, cinema has crossed borders now even more easily than it ever could because of the technology available to us, the platforms available to us. When Nandita Das's Manto was released in India, it was something that in Pakistan, a lot of people wanted to see. And the censors in their wisdom decided to ban it and did not allow it to be shown. So what happened is that it was released on Netflix, and almost everyone I knew was seeing it on Netflix, feeling the anguish and the pain and those memories and reliving them. When I came to Canada, you would possibly know my predecessor was Vikas Swarup, who wrote the book called Q&A, which later became Slumdog Millionaire and swept the Academy Awards. So this is the connection. He took cinema diplomacy to the next level in taking forward the sort of power that even modern Indian cinema has in a movie like Slumdog Millionaire. Coming to Canada, it's a completely unique relationship with Indian cinema. I've been reviewing some of it. It's not just the dynamic of a well-entrenched diaspora of 2 million people, but it's an important part of Canada's story, because now we have almost a subculture of films contributing to the sensibility of Indian cinema, if you will, and not just capturing the nostalgia of India for diaspora, but also contributing in many ways to a sort of subculture of films. And I'm sure we'll hear a little bit about it. Just some fun facts on what's happening in Canada vis-a-vis the Indian movie industry. In Vancouver and Calgary have now positioned themselves as popular filming destinations. We had the Akshay Kumar movie Thank You, made in 2011, which was shot in Toronto and Niagara. We had the Sunny Deol starrer Apne, which uses Toronto as a stand-in for New York. We had Hrithik Roshan's mega hit Koi Mil Gaya, which was shot in Alberta, and we have friends from Alberta who I'm sure will talk about that. And there was a movie called Neil and Nikki, which was an immigrant story set in Vancouver. So in fact, this has been a long sort of process in the making, particularly in this century. And now Western Canada has become the new Kashmir and or the new Switzerland for locations. So when cinema binds people, I think governments have to follow suit. So India and Canada signed a film co-production treaty in 2014. And this helps us bring together talents in an official way, in various incentives, tax breaks that are offered by both the governments become more available. But finally, governments only create conditions. It's up to the creative folks and the producers to get together and make this happen. One other interesting trend here is the production and filming of Punjabi films, which is more widespread in Vancouver as compared to Bollywood or in India. There are some producers like Daljit Thind of Thind Motion Pictures and G.P. Grewal, Amarinder Gill, who produce Punjabi films. About 7 or 8 films are shot every year, I'm told. And there are new projects, multiple new projects in the works. We know that in Vancouver, there's post-production facilities are being used, VFX, 3D conversion, animation, digital post-production work. And there are Indian companies involved in this to give a sort of high technological special effects edge. We also know that, for instance, the popularity of the star like Akshay Kumar with the South Asian population, and the Canadian government made him the brand ambassador for Canada tourism in 2010. And he's met a large number of prime ministers, he met PM Harper, PM Manmohan Singh at the G20 summit in Toronto in 2010. And we see a similar story in Eastern Canada, where beginning in the 70s, we had the Naz Theatre in Toronto, which was the first theatre in North America to screen only Indian films. And since then, it's been a huge movement towards the mainstream with language cinema, multiplexes showing Punjabi, Tamil, Malayalam, Telugu, Bengali films, and more. So I think we've seen a wonderful move towards mainstreaming of Indian cinema in Canada, not just for the diaspora, but for the larger population. We've seen a huge participation in the Toronto Film Festival. And I think this process goes on both ways, because Canada takes part and Canadian movies are shown, for instance, at the Goa Film Festival. So overall, we see a great scope for film exchanges to strengthen the people-to-people links between India and Canada. And as Indian content gets more diverse and mature, I hope to see it becoming not just an ethnic passion for a section of the diaspora, but something that is a mainstream representation of high quality world cinema and India's global statement. So let me stop right there. Thank you very much.
Namaskar, and thank you so much, sir. I would like to now invite our chair for today, and I would like to welcome all the panelists for this first session. I must say that I must thank all of them, because I know they're all very busy. I know that Manoj Bajpayee sir had he's just come out of a narration that he was doing. Amoghavarsha is in the middle of some shoot, and he has managed to reach some place where he'll get connection, and Erin, Fraser, and Matt also have taken time off. In fact, I think it's very early for them, and I thank all of you for having accepted to be here, and of course our ambassador sir also. I would like to introduce Shri Aseem Chhabra. He is the author of the best-selling and critically acclaimed books, Shashi Kapoor, The Householder, The Star, that was released in 2016, and then Priyanka Chopra, The Incredible Story of a Global Bollywood Star, that was in 2018. A film journalist, a freelance writer, and a festival director of the New York Indian Film Festival. Sir, now over to you.
Thank you. Namaskar, and thank you, and hello to everyone. Good morning and good evening. This is going to be a very interesting conversation. We have 4 panelists. First of all, I'm so glad Manoj Bajpayee has joined. Hello, Manoj ji, kya haal hai?
Hi, Aseem. Kaise hain?
Bilkul theek ho. I just did a conversation with him about a month ago, and we're chatting again on Zoom. Manoj Bajpayee really needs no introduction at all. I mean, he's one of the best known Indian actors. He's a terrific actor. He's won a couple of national awards. He's won the Padma Shri. He's acted in a range of films, from Satya to a big Bollywood film, Veer Zara, to some of the recent films, Aligarh. And he continues to surprise us with a number of films. He has a film out just recently streaming in India called Bhonsle. Wonderful man and a wonderful, wonderful actor. So we would love to hear from him about his experiences of being an actor and his films traveling. And I know he's traveled to many film festivals abroad. So Manojji, I'll come to you in a second. The other 2 panelists are Erin Fraser and Matt Bowes. Erin and Matt are joining us from Alberta, where I believe it's very, very early in the morning. They both host a podcast, a weekly podcast for Bollywood for Lovers. And it's quite fascinating, actually. I love listening to podcasts about, or writings about Indian cinema by non-Indians. And it'll be great to hear their perspective on how they reach out to Canadians in the university where they are and outside, and share their passion for Bollywood cinema as such. And lastly, we have a nature filmmaker, Amoghavarsha, who is an award-winning filmmaker and a wildlife photographer. He has worked with National Geographic and BBC. His films have shown at the UN. He addressed the UN headquarters I think early this year. His film Wild Karnataka was screened there, and Wild Karnataka also had a theatrical release in India, and so it's had a big success. So Manoj, I'm going to start with you. As it was said earlier, I'm the festival director of the New York Indian Film Festival, and you had actually come to our festival, I think 4 years ago with Aligarh. And yes. I know that you've traveled to other film festivals also across the US and North America, I'm sure in Europe also.
Right.
Tell us about your experiences. I mean, we know the kind of work you do, which is really, really remarkable. But tell us about your experiences when you traveled outside India with Indian cinema, sharing your films and then meeting the audiences, whether they're of the Indian diaspora and especially the non-Indians. So tell us something about that.
First of all, good evening to everyone there, and good morning to everyone who is waking up just now in some part of the world. And thank you, Safa, for really, giving us this honor to speak about cinema and its power on this podium. Aseem, yes, great connecting to you after just a month. It has been quite an eye opener for me, because it all started with Gangs of Wasipur. Actually, for me, with Gangs of Wasipur, I started traveling to different festivals. It started with Cannes. Then I've been to so many other film festivals. It was all thanks to Anurag Kashyap and him pushing me to all these festivals to represent the film. Then I was nominated at Asia Pacific in Brisbane. And after each screening, after with my conversation with the jury members, which was comprising of all the people, mostly were non-Indians, and all of them quite legendary in their cinematic world. Someone coming from South Korea, someone coming from Japanese film industry, or Turkish or Iranian film industry. They're watching your films, and you are nominated alongside with one Iranian actor, one Turkish actor, one actor from China or South Korea. That was quite an eye opener for me, because all of these people somewhere, they always thought that Indian film industry or Hindi film industry is only about song and dances. After the movement of art cinema, which existed in till the 80s, Aseem, if you remember, and it was a very, very strong movement. It has given so many talents to the film industry, Indian film industry. But after that, it started dying out, and suddenly there was a surge of new kind of filmmakers, led by Anurag and so many others, and so many young filmmakers started coming up, and they were not ready to, conform to the norms of mainstream cinema. But when we were traveling to say Brisbane or to London, to Cannes or anywhere else, for them it was we were the people coming from Hindi film industry, or Bollywood as they call it, which were meant to have song and dances. And they were quite surprised to meet actors or the technicians or the talents or the directors who made the films which was representing in these film festivals. They were surprised with the content, with the craft, with the narrative, with the storytelling, because that was something which was new to them. So what has happened that in the gap between the 80s and till few years back, we were only represented by the mainstream Hindi films abroad, where songs and dances were the main elements of the cinema, and that's how we were perceived as. Uh, but few years, just few years back, it all started changing. And now, when I represent my films, very recently I was representing Bhosle almost everywhere with my director. Sometime only my director was going, some co-actors were going, and I realized that the constant effort from the filmmakers, more than the actors or anybody, constant effort by all the new generation of filmmakers, which were growing up watching not only Hindi films, they're watching all kind of great films coming from any language, Indian language, be it Malayalam, Assamese, Tamil, um, Kannada, uh, or they were watching Polish films, Czechoslovakian films, or films from Sweden. So these new filmmakers, they were growing up, getting inspired by talents from all over the world. And now when you go to these film festivals, and there are so many films coming from India, not only from not only from the Hindi film industry, but they are also coming from different languages, and they are they are coming and emphasizing their existence. They are competing on a highest level in all of these biggest of the film festivals. So from Gangs of Wasipur to now, my journey, I have seen the changing definition in the of Indian film industry or Hindi film industry in the eyes of the of the non-diaspora audience in all the film festivals, in the eyes of all the great filmmakers and the technicians, assembling or coming in one place, uh, just due to the film, just because of the film festival which is happening, say in in Toronto, or if it's happening in Brisbane, it's happening in Sydney, it's happening in Busan. So suddenly I see a lot of change in the manner now they accept us as a very serious, filmmaking fraternity, which is a great change, Aseem, that I have seen over the few years of my going to these film festivals. Uh, I was in Toronto a couple of years back with Bhosle. There was and this festival is organized by some very enthusiastic, passionate people from Toronto. Uh, and people who were watching Bhosle, they were discussing it, with so much intensity and so much passion, discussing each and every element of a frame, of one twitch of the eyebrow, everything they were talking about it, the interpretation of the filmmaker, the interpretation of the writer, or the performers. So that kind of suits me, that kind of soothed me completely as a creative person, that we are being taken so much seriously all over the world now. uh, now we are no more only the song and dance people. We are also we create content. We take our craft very seriously. We are we uh, we are here for the passion of it, for we want to tell our story to the world and compete with any other talent in terms of the craft, in terms of the technique, in terms of the interpretation or storytelling, anywhere. So the numbers have increased. And Aseem, I think you are such a film fanatic, and also you've been documenting so many films and all of these film festivals and Indian representation in all of these festivals. You must have noticed this change that has happened since few years. after the late 70s and 80s, when Shyam Benegal sir and Govind Nihalani sir and Mani Kaul and so many great filmmakers from Malayalam industry, they were quite frequent to this film festival, and they were winning. They were winning. They were putting their stamp. They were representing India without us or the entire population really being aware of it. But because of social media, now the entire population of this country exactly knows where all we are traveling, what all films we are making, what all films are making India really proud as a filmmaking country. So this has been my observation uh, uh, after I started going to these film festivals, after I started attending all these award functions and serious ones where the juries were, completely non-Indians coming from, all great filmmaking countries.
Thank you, Manoj. Actually, while you were talking, suddenly I was thinking about, I moved to America. Not moved. I went to America in 1981 as a student. I went to study journalism at that time, and the year I arrived, there was a huge Indian film festival which the Indian government had organized along with, I think UCLA Film Archives had joined them. It was called Film Utsava, and it had traveled to all the major cities across America. I mean, New York, LA, Boston, Chicago, Miami. It was, and a big festival where you had works of Raj Kapoor and Mrinal Sen and Shyam Benegal and Satyajit Ray. And in fact, many of these, I attended a press conference with Raj Kapoor. Mrinal Sen was there. Gurudas films were shown, even though he had passed away. So that was wonderful. And then there was sort of a gap, as you said, because it became more and more of a Bollywood focus. And the other film industries in India, in the South and in other regions were kind of not given that kind of attention. The festival that I run in New York, it's called the New York Indian Film Festival, is actually the oldest Indian film festival in all of North America. It started 20 years ago. And initially, our intention was to make it a festival of diaspora films, where we wanted to show works by, people of Indian origin in North America. But very soon we realized that there's just excellent work being done in India. And again, not just in Hindi, in Malayalam, in Marathi, in Tamil, in Kannada, Assamese. This year, in fact, we just had an online festival. We showed a film in Khasi language and a film actually in Nepali language, but spoken by people in India, in Sikkim and in North Bengal. And one of the things I've realized is, I love watching films in any case. So it excites me so much to see these films and then to bring them. But we realized that, mainstream Bollywood, and I have nothing wrong with, I love mainstream Bollywood films, but those get theatrical release in most of the cities, big cities across North America. And in Europe, in UK, especially in Germany, for instance, the ambassador mentioned Shah Rukh Khan is very, very popular there. But the independent, smaller films, regional language films really don't get an opportunity, and many of them don't even now stream on Netflix and Amazon Prime. So I think these festivals have been a wonderful opportunity. Sharing these films with the audience, and then they tell you, like, my God, where do you find this film? They're available in India. We are trying to make them travel outside India because, this is India's soft power, really. It's the best message because there are stories from India and they're lovely, unique stories from different parts of India. And that's the best way to actually keep introducing India to the audiences. So on that note itself, I'll move to the next two panelists, Erin and Matt, because they are Canadians, but they are also ambassadors of Indian cinema. So I want to hear from both Erin and Matt. How did you guys, when was the first time you were introduced to Bollywood cinema, and this passion that you have that every week you do a podcast? I'm sure I would run out of ideas after a while. And the kind of, I'm curious about who your listeners are. And so you've been doing this for a while. So I would imagine exactly what they're looking for. So tell us about your journey.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having us. We're thrilled to be here. We first encountered Bollywood back when we were getting our undergrad degrees.
Yeah.
I majored in film studies, so in our kind of survey course here at the University of Alberta, where we went on the survey course on world cinema, they showed us Mother India.
Yeah.
So that was the first film that you saw. First one I saw was actually Dil Se. So those were the first two that we saw. And then we didn't really have a strong interest in Indian cinema for years. And then I saw Lutera when it came out in theaters. And I was absolutely blown away by the film. I just thought it was incredible. And I thought if it was playing in art house theaters, that more cinephiles, more filmgoers outside of the diaspora would go see the film. And so I got really excited about Bollywood and Hindi language cinema in general, and then started showing them to Matt. And
my first one was Doom 3.
Yeah, Doom 3 was the one that hooked you.
Yeah.
Which is, an over-the-top, ridiculous
complete
film.
other end of the spectrum, for sure.
But we started watching a lot of Hindi language films at first, and then we branched out to other languages, and we couldn't find any discussions, any criticism, any fandom in English here in North America, and we thought that was a big shame.
Yeah.
We wanted to engage in discussions about these films. We wanted to talk to other people who enjoyed these films, and we wanted more. And so I went looking for podcasts. I couldn't really find any. And so we saw that as an opportunity to fill in a gap. And so we launched our own.
Yeah. 5 years ago.
Yeah, about 5 years ago. We did about 6 months of research and watching movies, just reading as much as we could and watching a lot of movies to make sure that, we had a baseline for our discussions and that.
But I think our listeners know that we're not coming in as, experts who've seen every movie.
No.
We're coming in as people who are experiencing and going on a journey of watching Hindi language cinema from nothing and working their way towards a critical conscience about it. So people have been forgiving on that front.
Yeah, a big part of the podcast is our own journey as becoming fans of Indian cinema. And so the podcast is somewhat self-serving. We wanted to learn more about Hindi language films.
So we gave ourselves a reason to.
Yeah, so we gave ourselves a project. We haven't run out of ideas. We've covered 336 films in the 5 years that we've been doing.
It is bi-weekly though, so we don't do one every week.
Yeah.
that would be intense. But we try to do like a roundup of notable Hindi films at the middle part of the year and at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge part of it, is just kind of seeing what all is available and the ones that need to be watched year by year. But we also do various series, like right now we're watching one movie for every year of Amitabh Bachchan's career. So we're up to 1980 on that. But we also like to look at film modes like film noir.
Mm-hmm.
We do noir movies every November. And we also try and do, horror movies and tie it into, various events, and like the Olympics, for instance. We'll do sports movies when the Olympics comes out. So coming up with ideas is fairly easy, because you kind of pay attention to what's going on outside of the film world and try and tie in films to what's happening. We've also done a lot of streaming series. We started a sub-series called Netflix and Dill, where we watch streaming shows like The Family Man. We really enjoyed that one. And that's been amazing, is to see Indian streaming shows really take off and have excellent quality. And, they compete with, German, American, all these shows you're seeing on Netflix and Amazon Prime coming across the world. I think the Indian ones are as good, if not better, than a lot of those.
And we really couldn't do this show, we couldn't do this project without digital distribution and streaming services. Back in the day, really the only Indian films that would kind of make it to theaters here were things like Lagan, because it was nominated for the Academy Award. And that would be the only one that would really have subtitles. We would get prints shipped over from India, but they wouldn't have subtitles. So they really only played for the diaspora. But now movies are coming out at the same time as they are in India, at least mainstream ones. And we can go see them at our local cinema with subtitles.
Yeah.
And we can also watch a whole breadth of Indian films online through streaming services like Amazon Prime and Netflix, but also Eros Now and Hotstar.
Or the Shimaru YouTube channel. I think they actually do a great job on a lot of their movies.
So I think a lot of cinephiles like us, which then gets us to our audience, who are interested in Indian films, didn't necessarily have access before. And now that we do, the floodgates are open.
Yeah, we try and sort of direct people towards really good stuff, because it is kind of daunting to see, you know, so many different language groups, so many different movies from all of them. Where is some place you could start? And that's why we focused on Hindi cinema, because, you know, it's hard enough to immerse yourself in one film culture, much less all of the film cultures in India. So we just chose the one, but we do watch things from other language groups as well.
Yeah, it was important for us for the show to have a focus, because especially as outsiders, it would have been way too daunting to try and cover all of Indian cinema. Our listeners ask us all the time to cover more South Indian films.
Yeah, how come you haven't watched Super Deluxe?
I have.
What about Bahubali? Like we've seen those movies. It's just not our show, but we did like them.
Yes, and so we keep trying to encourage someone to start more podcasts about the other language groups, because we don't have the time. As far as our listeners go, we have a mixture of people like us, non-South Asian cinephiles who are fans of Asian popular cinema, and people who have grown up with Indian cinema, whether part of the diaspora or we've a big listenership in India and Pakistan as well.
We're often #1 in Pakistan on the iTunes charts, so that's really interesting.
And I think it's really exciting to see a large fandom of cinephiles start to come together online and start to discuss these films. And one of the most important things for us is to really kind of to discuss the films and the filmmaking and the performances and the stories, and not the gossip. You know, when I first started looking for an outlet, you know, for film criticism and discussions of Bollywood, I came across a lot of gossip, and that's not what interests me. I want to discuss the cinema.
Yeah.
So that was a big part of, I mean, we try and make our show fun, but we also try and make sure to talk about the filmmaking.
Yeah, I mean, film is the ultimate art form, right? It's got acting like the stage, it's got writing like books, it's got cinematography like paintings, and it's got editing, which is a art form unto itself. But you actually have to talk about those things when discussing a movie, because otherwise you could just be talking about literary criticism, you could be talking about theater criticism. You have to talk about that synthesis of everything.
I will say the biggest criticism we ever received was an iTunes review that told us that Bollywood isn't made for white people, which we don't disagree with.
It's totally true.
It's, you know, these films are not made with a white audience in mind. However, we think it's really important that people engage with pop culture outside of their own culture. They engage with art outside of their own art, and that's how you engage with the world. And
you attain a global consciousness this way, by seeing something through someone else's shoes, you know?
And just because these films aren't made with us in mind doesn't mean we can't enjoy them, and doesn't mean we can't discuss them, and doesn't mean we can't encourage other people to enjoy them and discuss them, which is really one of the main things that we're trying to do. We want more people to watch Indian films.
Yeah.
And we want to encourage more people who have never seen an Indian film before to watch these incredible films, because some of the best movies in the world are coming out of India. Some of the best filmmaking is coming out of India.
Some of the most amazing cinematography I've ever seen. Anyway, does that answer your question?
Do you also look at some of the smaller independent films when you're looking at Bollywood? So obviously it's Hindi language. I mean, the kind of cinema that I was mentioning to that Manoj has acted in, Bhosle was, I think, last year. He made a film called Gali Guliyan the year before. Gangs of Wasipur was a much bigger film. I'm just curious that if your audience is also interested in that very niche, specialized cinema, but very, very brilliant stories. And And as I said, Manoj is one of the, he's the star of that cinema. He also does a lot of mainstream Bollywood also, of course.
Yeah. Well, one thing that we try to do is when you look at a film movement like film noir, for instance, you can look at, you know, a big marquee film, but you can also look at a film that has a smaller release, but is still drawing on the same themes and talk about them in the same way, because, you know, it doesn't matter how big the release of the film was. If they're playing in the same, you know, zone, you could talk about them on the same level.
Mm-hmm. I would say we try and balance stuff out, but our episode on Miss Lovely and Masson and Titley, we did an episode on kind of films that hit screen at cons in the In Certain Regards section, I think. It's unfortunately our least listened to episode.
Yeah, the audience typically seems to enjoy the sort of big budget stuff a bit more.
Yeah, anytime.
At least when they're downloading what they decide to listen to.
Anytime we discuss Shah Rukh Khan, it gets a lot of downloads.
Yeah.
That being said, that being said, we follow our interests, and so we have a film festival here in Alberta, the India Film Festival of Alberta. And we have covered the films that screened there before. So that's how we saw Newton and A Death in the Gunge and Angry Indian Goddesses.
Angamali Diaries.
Yeah, Angamali Diaries, Lipstick Under My Burqa. So, you know, I think anytime you are, you know, putting out a product that, you know, is in some way being driven by things like downloads and listens, you do have to play a bit of a balancing act of what we're interested in and what's popular, but we also like popular stuff too. We kind of like everything. If the movie's good, then I like it.
And I especially enjoy watching movies from the 50s and 60s, and regardless of how many people download those, I'm always trying to watch them and talk about them. Yeah,
those episodes are hard because it is hard to find those films with English subtitles. That's one of the biggest challenges of trying to go back to some of the classics, which can be rather frustrating.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's interesting. You both mentioned, one of you mentioned about somebody saying that Bollywood is not meant for white people. I actually had a very, very fascinating experience. It was exactly 15 years ago, in August, September of 2005, that Karan Johar came to New York City to shoot Kabhi Alvida Na Kehna. And I began to notice, because he needed a lot of extras, and I began to notice that, you know, when you're needing extras in this New York City, he needed people of different colors and shades. And I began to notice a lot of white people were spending the whole day on the sets, whether it was the Grand Central Station or whether it was the Columbia University steps, etc. But they were passionate about Bollywood films, which I did not realize until that time in that serious way. And, you know, and also the film has such big stars, Amitabh and Shah Rukh, and it had Abhishek and Rani Mukherjee and Preeti Zinta, and they had all turned up in New York City. And this is before social media. This is before Facebook and before Twitter. And yet the word was spreading so much. So yeah, but thank you. I mean, you guys are doing great service for Indian cinema. But try and bring in more indie films also. I mean, you know, even if you have smaller audiences, it's a slow, it's by brick, you sort of like make, you know, these step by step sort of thing, you change the audience. But thank you. I'll move to the last panelist, Amoghavarsha, whose film Wild Karnataka got a theatrical release in India and was shown at the UN also. I wanted to hear from you, your experience of taking your film outside India, especially at various venues. And also, you know, when it was a documentary, it's a documentary about wildlife in India, in Karnataka especially. It must have been an eye-opener for a lot of people who didn't expect, you know, people think they go to Africa for wildlife. But the fact that you can have, you know, wildlife in India, we have tiger sanctuaries across India. So tell us about your experiences about sharing your film.
Thanks so much, Aseem. Glad to be here on the panel with such bright celebrities. And I just want to take a moment to sort of thank Center for Soft Power, because cinema, especially during these times, has been very special to me. We've been doing a bit of filming on the COVID and its situation in Karnataka. And I've been telling people, imagine what would happen if there was no cinema, if there was no streaming today. 1.3 billion people locked in their homes. There couldn't have been a bigger mess. And I think the role of media and cinema, especially during these times of hardship, is I think something that we all have to take into cognition. I think it's a great kind of a movement of streaming and all of that, that we have access to these things. And I've been very inspired by Indian cinema throughout. And to sort of tell you about my own filming experience with Wild Karnataka, before we even wanted to take it to the United Nations or outside, we wanted to take it to the big screen. For me, it's cinema when it's watched by everyone is when there is actually a big shift in consciousness. And in our field of wildlife filming and conservation and sustainability, we always keep saying that the biggest gap is awareness. It's not that people don't want to do good, but just that people don't know. And like you yourself said, that when people think of wildlife, they think of Africa. And we said, hey, let's just shoot our backyard, right? It's easy to go to Arctic and Antarctica and shoot, the Great Migration in Africa. But what if we just focused on our own state, like the smallest of areas and just our own backyard? And until the film came out, a majority of people did not know that Karnataka had some of the highest number of elephants in the world and tigers in the world. And the proof of this is, when we approached Sir David Attenborough to do the voiceover for a small state documentary, right? It's not one of those epic, across the planet kind of a thing. He really agreed, which shows that especially stories like this don't have regionality, don't have borders, don't have states, don't have countries, because it's universally an appealing story to tell of our own backyards. And the reception has been quite good even across the world. And thankfully, because wildlife is something where there is no language barrier, in a sense that we've also dubbed it into multiple languages in India. It's been able to go far and wide. And for me, bringing it to the theaters, right, the big cinema theaters has been a very heartwarming sort of an experience. And I've always felt that, I used to joke, we have a joke in Bangalore that if you go to watch wildlife films, it's only the British Council audience that goes. That's about 50 of us who go and watch the same films. Now, how do we take this message beyond these 50 people or beyond these 100 people? So we had a lot of responses when the film went to cinema saying, I took my 1-year-old kid to watch it in the theaters. I took my parents to watch it in the theaters. And we saw standing ovations in pretty much every show. And then the film ran for 50 days, which is unheard of. And this being the first ever Indian wildlife film to see, go into theaters, I think it's sort of validation, right? We always keep thinking, when you talk to theaters and distribution, that, hey, there is no audience for this kind of content. And I think we've been able to prove otherwise, that if there are good films like, art cinema, or there are good films like this, people will watch. And I think they need as much of a showcase, because if we have to live on this planet in a more sustainable way and sort of avert the disasters that we are currently facing, I think we all need to sort of wake up with this awareness. And the point about how all of this fits into sort of what the theme of this whole conversation is, which is soft power, and how cinemas influence that, is plastic ban in India, as an example, is single-handedly because of media. Plastic does not harm people. I mean, people don't die because of plastic. It's a cheap, easy, sort of a convenient kind of a product. But the whole of the country decided that we got to ban plastic. Why? Simply because there was media awareness. And I think the power of this, the power of cinema, the power of media has only been realized like a bit. I think there is so much more to be realized out of this. And I think this is a great start for all of us on that, Aseem.
Thank you. That's really fascinating. We'll come back to you. Manoj, I wanted to talk to you again. And I know you addressed this, but when you watch, even a film like Gali Guliyan, for instance, and Bhonsle, these are your last two films, which were very, very independent, small stories. Even in India, they didn't have much of a reach. Bhonsle is now playing on Sony Live. And I think, I don't know, maybe Gali Guliyan is playing also. So when you meet with audiences in India, especially with films like that, and then when you travel to film festivals, Bhonsle traveled to many festivals, just any observations about the audiences, how they react to this kind of cinema?
Aseem, that's a very good question, actually. What has changed? Our filmmaker friend from Karnataka has been just talking about it. That somewhere, somewhere we filmmakers, or we the distributors, the lobby of the distributors, or the exhibitors, or the mainstream producers, this, somewhere we made they made a major mistake by really deciding what audience likes. And I'm making this statement after having worked in all kind of films. Okay, I have worked in pure pot boilers. I have worked in middle of the road. I have been, very passionately busy in getting films made in the indie genre. Um, I worked in series, OTT series also, and this has been my, observation, which has been quite fascinating. That audience understand everything. They are ready to consume a product if they find it engaging, and that engagement can be in any genre. Okay, not necessarily it should be a mainstream. If there is a film called Bhosle, which got released on Sony Live just now, a month back, the amount of respect, the amount of love and admiration it got from the audience. And the audience, when I'm talking about audience, which is there in this lockdown period. And our filmmaker friend from Karnataka, he's been saying that, this is the cinema, or the creative art, is such a blessing in this time. The audience has gone ahead and watched Bhosle, and they have been writing about it. They have been doing sketching in tribute to Bhosle, and there are thousands of sketches, Aseem, of Bhosle. And that shows that all this while we were actually underestimating the audience. In this time, when audience has, the plethora of films to choose from, they go ahead and watch a film, any film from any genre. And when they shows that much of love, then we come to, understand that audience doesn't judge a film based on a genre. Audience wants to consume anything which is engaging, which is fascinating, and that can belong to any category, be it mainstream or anyone, or comedy, or independent. And my experience in releasing the films has been horrendous. Okay, it has been nerve-wracking for me. After Gangs of Wasipur, I've decided to put all my might, all my credibility as a known film actor, Indian film actor, behind those independent films. And the effort has been going on, and is still is on, to to really push a great script, a great director, who is actually crying for some kind of a recognition, who is finding it difficult to set it up. And this is where I found Devashish Makhija, who made Bhosle. This is where I found Dipesh Jain. Okay, this is where I found the filmmaker of Budhya Singh, which is on Netflix. Okay, so this has been my effort, and I've realized that in the time of OTT, uh, it became easy for some time, but now, as you said it very rightly in the beginning, that the few of the films are finding it difficult to even come on OTT. It's nothing. It's just that the perception of the in charge of the OTT, or the perception of the in charge of the multiplexes, and they was wrong. They completely underestimated. And it has been proven time and again that there is an audience looking for variety. There is an audience who, if he's ready to consume a mainstream Hindi film, romantic film, or an action film, they're also ready to consume a Bhosle there. But we will have to give it to them, and this chance we have not been getting in theater here. even in India. It has been a task. It has been a humongous task for all of us to release one film, knowing that we are going to put in everything that we have in our pocket, knowing that it is going to be a lose-lose situation. But it's still, we were ready, but we were not getting those chances. Even if we are getting a release, the shows are not right for those kind of films. If you are giving me 9 o'clock show in the morning, 9 o'clock show is only meant for Rajnikant fans or Salman Khan fans. If you're giving me a 9 o'clock show for Bhosle or for Budhia Singh, who will go to watch it? So those were the shows which mainstream films were reluctant to take it. They have been allotted to these small films, independent films, and by the time it started growing in the theaters, they used to take it off because the lobby of the big mega blockbusters are very, very strong, and we've been fighting it. We've been fighting it not with our words or with our voices, but with our work. We've been consistently making those films, making sure that they are made, making sure that they travel to all of these film festivals internationally. They make some noise on social media, and they find some interest in the corporates here, in the distributor's eyes. So the effort has been ongoing, Aseem. Effort has been ongoing, and I admire the guts and the patience and the perseverance of these independent filmmakers, knowing that it's going to be a path full of thorns, knowing that it is going to be almost a no-win situation. Still, they have been making it and representing India, and representing India with a lot of pride. And it's all and showcasing it and competing at the highest level in those film festivals. But audience is there. Coming back to your question, audience is there, but are we giving them a chance to choose from? That's the question.
Good, thank you. That was very, very interesting, your observations. Erin and Matt, wanted to come back to both of you also again. How do you, when you decide to discuss, for instance, I was just listening to your Dil Chahta Hai and Socha Na Tha podcast. Do you announce earlier in the last podcast that those are the films you're going to talk about? Do you let the audience watch those films first if they're streaming? Because if you talk for like an hour or something about a film that the people have not seen, I'm sure you also have South Asian diaspora. You said you're very big in Pakistan, which is, I'm really impressed, but even Indians in Canada, for instance, in North America. How do you make sure that they have some awareness of the film itself?
Well, we've tried from the very beginning to only ever use legal sources for films. And at the end of our episodes, we typically say our next episode is going to be about such and such. But we have run into a problem. It's funny about that specific episode. We were going to watch Costa Cagosla,
yes,
which was taken off of Netflix literally the day before.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes these streaming partners are not super helpful in that sense. But we do try and make it so that at least with the resources we have, our audience is able to watch the movies legally before or after having heard our episode. But it can be a little bit difficult because those big streaming companies, they honestly don't care. They don't tell anyone when something moves. We kind of rely on a website called Access Bollywood,
yeah,
which is run by a woman in Chicago named
Kathy Gibson.
Kathy Gibson, who has made it her life's work essentially to monitor the different streaming services and tell you which Hindi films are available, and some other languages too.
Yeah.
She's pretty big on Malayalam cinema and other things like that. So we do try to make it so that listeners are able to have the same experience as us and are able to understand what we're talking about when we start to discuss a film.
Yeah, it's really important to us that anything that we discuss, that our audience be able to have access to it. So that does sometimes limit some of our film choices. which is unfortunate, but we're always pushing for, kind of more options, more ways to watch films, and encouraging people to, to try streaming services like Hotstar and Eros Now, which, specialize in Indian content and are available to us.
Yeah, and there's some other streaming services that are probably less known, but really, really useful, like Canopy and Hoopla, which are accessible through one's public library, but offer access to lots and lots of world cinema and lots of independent world cinema that the other streamers don't touch at all.
And I will say that since we started the show, we have noticed within the past 5 years just that things have been growing, and there has been more films available and more films of different language groups. Like I think of, how we used to have to share our DVD of Q's Ganju with people, because like how else, and Tasher Desh, I got both of those on DVDs and shared them with friends because I didn't know any other way to show these films to people. And then he had Brahman Naman come out on Netflix, and then suddenly I was able to tell everyone to go check out those movies. And we did have a listener check out Ganju, and she was shocked.
Yeah, I don't think she liked it very much.
I don't know, she did.
It's kind of an intense movie.
It's great, but yeah.
There's one other problem though with some of the streaming services, is even if you could find the movie there, they often have changed the runtime or changed the aspect ratio without saying. So you can often have 4 or 5 different runtimes of a very, very popular movie, and it's difficult to say which one we watched versus what's available somewhere else. So I do think the companies could stand to do a lot better job of taking care of these movies and making sure that everyone has the same even film available to watch, and it's shot and shown correctly.
Yeah. I'll also say on the flip side, we get a lot of requests to cover films like Mr. India, which we still haven't seen. We know it's a very big deal. We would really like to see it, but we have yet to find a legal copy of it. And until we do, we won't watch it.
Yeah. Well, and Sholay, the biggest one of all time. We had to watch a DVD from the library, which was probably a rip-off scan. And it's honestly criminal that is not available anywhere for streaming, at least here.
We had to wait years actually to watch Gangs of Wasseypur until it was released in North America. There was a pirated DVD available at the library, which we told them about, but I was shocked that got through at our local library.
And that was an interesting experiment into cutting it into episodes rather than showing it as the film. It is a long watch. I watched 5 hours straight. I had to watch the last half hour the next day, but I did almost watch it in one sitting, so I felt pretty good about that.
I did it in one sitting twice.
Yeah, well, you're stronger than I am.
Apparently.
So you mentioned Canopy. I have subscription to Canopy through New York Public Library, and Gangs of Wasseypur is available on Canopy. Yeah. But as you know, Gangs of Wasseypur originally was released as part 1, part 2, and Manoj is in part 1. And I won't give away if people haven't seen it, but his the ending of part 1 is a very crucial part of the story. But Guneet Monga, the producer, and Anurag Kashyap, they worked with Netflix, and they did it into a serial part, so, and I don't know how successful that was, because it's now back again, wherever it's available as part 1 and it's part 2.
It's on Netflix right now. It's running on Netflix right now.
Yeah. Now, they mentioned also the service called Canopy, which we have in North America, which you get free through your public libraries in America. And so it's available on that also.
Yeah, there's tons of indie films from across the world available on Canopy. It's an amazing resource if you have access to it.
Oh yes, they've got Court and a range of very interesting films. Really, yeah, that is true. Yeah. I want to go back to Amoghavarsha. You've taken the film outside India, and one of the smartest things you did was you were able to get David Attenborough to narrate the film, because that immediately, I guess, takes a film to a very different level. I'm sure people took the film a lot more seriously. So when you showed it at the UN, tell us about the kind of audiences you were getting, especially various countries, wherever you've taken the film to.
I think the experience has been very overwhelming. And people have not seen it as a film about a particular state, but they've seen it as a film about this planet, a short snapshot of this planet. And so I'll tell you this interesting thing that happened. I was in New York on March 4th, screening the film at the UN. And this was just the beginning of sort of this whole COVID thing. And people were coming and giving me hugs because they were so overwhelmed. Okay, I was like, okay. So people were really moved, and these were people from all around the world. I mean, hardly a few Indians in the audience. The movie is now playing in BBC America on the US channel. It's playing in SBS in Australia. It's playing in China. It's playing in Korea. And I think the beauty is that a story well told is universal appeal. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It doesn't matter who makes it. And like you very well said, having a voice like Sir David, who we call God in our field, is another level of validation. And what Manoj was saying is very, very, very true, which is, we can't make the decision on who's going to watch it and how they're going to like it. It's pretty much like build it and they'll come. So make it and they'll watch it. And then we can't make the decision. So a lot of the times I worked on series on National Geographic and BBC where the films were shot right in my backyard, but the films don't come back to India for us to watch, which I think is very sad, right? Like, I mean, we make the film and Indians don't get to see it for like 3-4 years because the rights get changed and shifted. So with this film, what we did was when we sold it to the distributors, we said that we will hold back educational rights and non-profit rights. So which means we are able to now take this film into schools, into colleges, free of cost for anybody who wants to watch this. And I think making content accessible, I think is the key. And so many of the times when my previous films, I pretty much put it out from YouTube for people to watch it on a Creative Commons license. And people from across the world love it because, these stories are so special. You don't get to hear these stories. I mean, think about it, right? Like I would want to really know what's the story in Canada or what's the story in North America. Like I know my stories, but I want to know these stories and I want these stories to come in their purest form. And when local filmmakers and independent filmmakers make films up in their own sort of ecosystem, that purity and the integrity of the story comes through. And I think now more than ever, the audience is very, very sort of nuanced. They understand what good stories are. They understand what pure stories are. And that audience is definitely increasing. To give you some statistics, we've been told that when the film, our film aired on Discovery, it was in the top 5 all-time watched infotainment segments of all time. I think, just after Modi, Bear Grylls, and Rajinikanth Bear Grylls. So which is pretty heartwarming, right? That we don't have any super celebrities in the show. It's just the animals. So I think it's very, very heartwarming, Aseem. I think it just opens doors for anybody else to make films like this anymore. And PVR will definitely not say we won't play documentaries, because they initially, when I spoke to them, oh, who's going to watch documentaries? Who's going to watch documentaries? And now they're like very happy. It tried 50 days. So I think it opens a lot of doors for others.
That's wonderful. All right, so I'm going to come back to all 4 panelists. Just your final thoughts, Manoj. You want to just any thoughts that after listening to all the people speak also?
It's heartening. It's heartening to see, our friends from Canada. They are really, dedicating their day to Indian cinema. And they were talking about Angamala Daddy. That's one of my favorite films. And I'm after the filmmaker to make a film with me. And he kind of promised me. So he keeps running away because, he keeps shifting his focus. I mean, he's such a genius filmmaker. He's one of my favorite filmmakers from India. And also what has happened that this COVID situation has given me personally a lot of opportunity to watch films from all languages, be it Kannada or Tamil or Malayalam, and Polish, and so many films from Eastern Europe. It has actually kind of compelled us by putting us inside our houses. We don't have anything better to do but to read and watch. I'm not a writer, so I don't write that much. But the cinemas from all the languages here in India and cinemas from Eastern Europe, they have completely opened my eyes. They have educated me as a creative person. The films, so many films that I haven't heard of, Aseem. So many films which may have traveled to some few festivals, but they didn't make it to the headlines. But those films are there. You just have to dig it up, and you get educated so much. You improve as a creative person when you're watching films from. I was watching a film. I somehow accidentally I watched this film called The Hater. Okay, it's a Polish film, and it is talking about the demons of social media, and what social media can do. And I started watching it without expecting anything from that film. It completely blew my mind. uh, Likewise, when I'm watching a Malayalam film, a film that I haven't heard of, I, by the time when I finish the film, I'm an improved actor. I'm an improved creative person. I'm an improved person. So this is the power of cinema. If you are ready to be affected by it, you will definitely come out as a person who is much more informed and much more improved. This is what I believe in. The power of cinema is uh, is actually still quite underestimated. We are only limited to entertaining, but pers- uh, I really feel that cinema can actually, correct so many loopholes in you as a human being. If we really, watch any creative and passionate work with lot of open mind.
Thank you very much. That was really appreciated, very fascinating. Erin and Matt, any final thoughts? Being the ambassadors of Indian cinema up in Canada.
Well, I guess first of all, the idea of this Lilojos Polisari, I'm probably butchering the director's name, I apologize, but the idea of that film with you, Mr. Bajpayee, that sounds incredible.
Yeah.
Everything he's done, which we've had to seek out some of his stuff and order Blu-rays from India because we became so obsessed with his films. But everything he's done is incredible, and whatever he's going to follow Jallikattu up with is going to be, I'm sure, just as incredible. That movie was insane.
Yeah, that was an amazing movie.
I guess for final thoughts, the thing I would say is, we have found ourselves in very strange times. We are used to going to the cinema and kind of enjoying that sacred space, and now we can't do that. But I think now is a time when everyone is engaging with more movies than ever at home and online. And while we are all apart physically, we can't travel for film festivals. We're having to attend film festivals online. We're attending one next week with Fantasia, which is in Montreal. They're showing an Indian film, so we're going to check that out. But while we're all separated, I think film brings us together. That you talk about the power of cinema. Cinema is powerful, and I think it can connect people around the world and show people things about other people around the world. Roger Ebert always talked about film being an empathy machine, which always resonated with me, and is also something I think about when I think about that criticism we received that we shouldn't be watching these films because we're white. Film allows you to see different points of view from around the world and to emotionally connect with artists around the world, and that's very valuable and I think very important, and one of the reasons why I think more people should watch all kinds of Indian films.
Yeah, as many as you can get.
And as the ambassador said right at the very beginning, I mean, it's one of our India's best exports, really. And all the Indian films are not reality based or or reflect life in India, but they all give a taste of India to audiences outside India, and that's very, very important. So, thank you. And finally, Amoghavarsha, any final thoughts?
No, I just would like to thank all of you because I think it's a fantastic forum, And I think the Center for Soft Power couldn't be an apt sort of a platform for this, because think about it. When people come to watch a film, they're giving their most expensive commodity, which is their time and attention. Today, to get a minute of somebody's time is so hard. People pay you money, but they won't give you time. If a movie is watched by 1 million people, that's 1 million people giving their attention and their dedicated time in a theater or on a screen. And now that kind of power, like that's millions of minds that we have access to, the kind of impact that we can create. What kind of planet would we want to live in? What kind of human beings would we like to be? What kind of, like you said, all of you said, empathy, right? Like what kind of empathy can we develop? Very interestingly, like Manoj said, how we can become better ourselves, which is also a reflection of how much can we make the world around us better. I mean, I can't think of a better and more powerful tool in today's generations to just make our life better and the world around us better. That's what I like to say.
So thank you very much. And thank you to all four of the panelists. And also a lot of thank you. I really appreciate the Center for Soft Power to, come up with this idea of Indian cinema and how we call it timeless cinema, the panel, but how it sort of takes the word about India around. So watch Indian films. This is for everybody, especially people outside India. You learn a lot about India by watching our films. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody.
You. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Aseem.
you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Matt.
you.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Amol.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Vijay Lakshmi ji, did you want to make some comments?
Yes, I have left it to Aparna to make these comments.
Namaste. I thought since we've all been talking about these difficult times, we would like to play a very short film by a very well-known film director, Bharat Bala. And he shot India during COVID. So this is India, the pain, but also the unity that Indians have shown in the face of these trying times. Let's just watch and probably end on this solemn note. Koti ji?
हिंदुस्तान को बचाने के लिए, हिंदुस्तान के हर नागरिक को बचाने के लिए, आपको बचाने के लिए, आपके परिवार को बचाने के लिए घरों से बाहर निकलने पर पूरी तरह पाबंदी लगाई जा रही है। देश के हर राज्य को, हर केंद्र शासित प्रदेश को, हर जिले, हर गांव, हर कस्बे, हर गली मोहल्ले को अब लॉकडाउन किया जा रहा है।
पता नहीं क्या हुआ, एक पल में ही जैसे सबकी जिंदगी बदल गई। पर कल सूरज निकलेगा, उठेंगे हम।
So I'd like to thank you all very much. Aparna?
Thank you so much for joining us in this wonderful session. Thank you, Aseem Chhabra ji. It's been wonderful the way you've guided this discussion. And it's been 125 years since cinema first came to India. And I think this was a fitting tribute to all the films, the filmmakers, the lovely music that's always associated with Indian cinema. And I think all of us can say, Mera Dil Hai Hindustani, and it will always strike that beautiful note within us. Thank you so much to all the panelists. Thank you.
And thank you very much to Shri Ajay Bisaria, the ambassador, for joining us on this session.